the lecture, just a quick note on the midterm this Wednesday. Okay, as I mentioned in the WhatsApp group that the topics will be up to budgetary control, but MBS and outcome-based budgeting will be excluded. So these two topics will be for final exam. Okay. So you would expect, so I would, it's quite detailed, the midterm, so be ready. Maybe I'm not sure how detailed meaning to you and how detailed means to me. So just be ready. And it's a closed book exam. Right. So for today, I will continue with. Okay, just a quick. So what happened is this week. Okay, today will be class, and then Wednesday will be midterm. So next week, the whole week is for the assignment, right? So our next meeting will be in week 8. In week 8, okay. But next week, of course, I mean during the class time or during the consultation hours, we can have arrangement for consultation. I would appreciate during the class hours. Okay, if at the time you can always WhatsApp me. I think some groups they arrange the meeting with me through Google Meet, through WhatsApp, and then we arranged for the meeting. Okay. So I continue for this week on procurements. Okay, the next topic for procurements is public-private partnership. Okay, let me share the slides. Okay, so I think this is also an interesting topic. I think procurement is interesting area. Not only interesting, but is also an area in public sector where in a very high risk area, okay, in terms of corruption. I think if you look at corruption cases, mainly surrounding with the procurement, with the procurement process or procurement, tender purchasing, and very high risk area. But because it's very lucrative, but it's about public money. If they use them properly, will give very high impact to the country. Okay, it's about investment in public services. Okay, so where good education, good healthcare system. Yes, are you listening? Okay. Right. So I think 1 day or 2 days ago there was a case about this procurement. I think today there was a news on another form of cartel. I think so many cartel in Malaysia. Okay, but but the good part is SPRM or the Corruption Commission taking the actions. Okay, but to what extent that will complete? Okay, that's of course it's very challenging as well. Okay, so we discuss further, but at the same time, of course, procurements in public sector being recognized, okay, a great contribution if they've been done properly, because it can speed up quality, construction or provide a provision of public services. Okay, if it is done properly, and will benefit the country in big time. Okay, so we look at this. Procurements, public-private partnership. I mean, in terms of public-private partnership, that's basically the original form of procurements. Okay, and for Malaysian government, as one of the developing countries and fast-growing economies, okay, we are one of the countries in the world where we are at the point of entering into the stage of becoming developed country status. Okay, but it's not there yet. Still need to be done pretty much, but the development is there. Okay, and of course, in terms of the size of the country, I think ASEAN basically, this region. I think the whole world, when they look at us, we are part of ASEAN. Okay, because ASEAN is a very high impact on the world economy. ASEAN as a whole, okay, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, okay, Brunei, Philippines, okay, these are, if you combine this, it become a very very significant region, okay, economically. So we are part of that, right? So that's why, I mean, you have to look at Malaysia in that perspective as well. Right, so definitely in this case, the relationship, the cooperation between public and private, because generally I think government providing, if you look at socio-economic development or nation plan, basically, the economy, okay, the government is led the public or private sector communities, private business, okay, to prosper, to flourish, to develop. And with that, it can create jobs. Okay, so this is one of the solutions that the government provide. To get to improve the employment, because employment is one of the major key indicators for the socio-economic development. Okay, right. I think, and if you look at the government agencies, they benefit from public-private partnership. Okay, so I show this example. Even it happened in our place, okay, in our campus. These are, what is this? You've been here or never been?
Hospital,
Never.
sir.
Huh? These are
The
specialist.
hospital.
Oh, not yet, It's in Kuantan, isn't it? I've never been, but just to show you the building, because the building is developed based on this PFI. Later on, we'll cover PFI, because private finance initiative is part of public-private partnership. Okay, so the facilities is developed based on this platform, and to enhance. So then, in terms of development of the projects, as well as the financing, okay, to enhance the government services. Then you have this our IIUM Medical Center. Okay. Right, principles of adopting PPP, differences between conventional procurement, PPP, and privatization, example of PPP, okay, and then we'll discuss on PFI. Lastly, issues of PPP for accountants. Right, principle of adopting private-public partnership for socio-economic impact, value for money and cost saving to the government. Okay, I think very similar to even general procurements. Quick delivery of the project and service enhancement, increased level of accountability, efficiency, and effectiveness. Okay, so if you look at these principles, very good. Okay, at the principle level, that's why these techniques been adopted, because of when it is a platform or a technique or a way of doing things that have that promise and also been deliberated, been tested, that can somehow provide high impact. Okay, then it should be adopted by the government. Okay, so because these are general of we can consider this, as, because it's happening worldwide. Okay, it's not only Malaysia. Okay, generally Malaysia, okay, in other countries, okay, we are following, but somehow this knowledge sharing is there, okay, for us to adopt a good practice or best practice. I think both from private sector and public sector, adopting best practice in management or in administration, okay, is the way, one of the options, okay, to move forward. Right, I think so. You can see this, have socio-economic impact, so that the Malaysian as a whole, the population as a whole will have will benefit. And then look at value for money and cost saving to the government. Okay, quick delivery of the projects. So follow the timeline and also providing good services, because private sector is providing services on behalf of the government. But how the mechanisms that they will provide, okay, there are ways of doing that, ranging from concessions until and PFI is one of the options. increased level of accountability, efficiency, and effectiveness. So if there is, I think that's why if you look at this, the last sentence, we should also think about the governance and then the performance together. Okay, generally, of course, I mean everything must be put into contracts and then been given awarded to a very capable suppliers, okay, or companies. And then with that, they must also have good monitoring of how they are doing. Okay. So these are basic ideas, and also some, it's just that a matter of how to translate that into practice. Okay, that's the harder part. Okay, okay, to observe all these principles to achieve them. Okay, so that's how the relevant mechanisms ongoing. So how to make sure that this can be achieved. Okay, but the underlying principle is basically try to benefit from the efficiency of the private sector companies. Okay, because private sector is very focused. Okay, if they want to do one type of services, let's say oil drilling, okay, or supplying for the healthcare, they are very focused, so they have the benefit. And then because of the private sector context, okay, because of competition, so they have that element of market benefits. Okay, so for that, how the government basically can benefit from that strengths. Okay, so to bring that into the public sector platform. Okay, so these are the ideas. Okay, when the partnership between public and private sectors to work together to provide public services. Okay, so either directly or indirectly. Right, so comparison here between conventional. I think at this point we discussed pretty much is conventional procurements, right? And then we have PPP, and then privatization. So the very extreme is privatization. Okay, privatization just quickly. So privatization means that it's a public sector services, but it's been handed over to the private entities. Okay. So basically in Malaysia, I think before we move to conventional PPP, I think we just discuss quickly privatization. Okay, privatization in Malaysia, basically to that point, I think during 1980s, to improve the government services, that one, to reduce the size of the government. So in that way, we'll focus to and enhance the government services. So that's why you can see that in the case of GLC, government linked companies in Malaysia, okay, they are basically from departments or statutory body. They have been converted into a wholly owned private company or government company. Sorry, okay. I think very straightforward example, TNB and Telecom. Okay, these two. TNB is it used to be a statutory body in the government and then converted into a company. Okay, become TNB. Okay, Tenaga Nasional Berhad. TNB is sole provider of the power in Malaysia. And then similarly in the case of telecom, for telephone, of course there are liberalization of the industry as well, but at the same time, if you look at, I think for line phone, still been pretty much been controlled by the JLC, the telecom, by telecom. So that is part of the privatization process. Okay, so converted into a wholly owned company, so they have more flexibility. They can compete in the market. They have more. They are not directly bound to parliamentary control. Okay, so they have that more flexibilities, and then they can take expertise from the private sector. They have that flexibility. So with that, okay, by right, they can perform better. Okay, so that's the idea of privatization, but it's not necessarily. I think after 20 or 30 years now, I think in terms of knowledge and experience, the country has learned that it's not the only solution. Okay, privatization, and not only that, if you pass to the private sector, it will create super performance. But the idea is, of course, you need to get good operation, very world-class operation. But at the same time, the governance must be also very strong. Okay? Otherwise, there will be, with the weak governance, you can undermine the potentials of the limited company. Okay, that's for privatization. It's a huge area to study, and Still, I think if it is done or mobilized properly, it will give good benefit. Okay. Secondly, okay, if you look at conventional, okay, I think so far we discussed on conventional. Conventional, I think last class we talk about conventional procurements. Okay, procurements are funded directly via public budget. Okay, okay, as a development budget directly funded through the government budget. Immediate impact on public sector financial position, definitely the government have to pay directly. Risks are entirely borne by the public sector, okay, as we discussed. Okay, when the government, let's say they involve in tender or in the price quotation, okay, they pay directly. The government agencies pay directly. Extensive public sector involvement all stages of project life. Okay, when the development, if it is projects, okay, been outsourced, still the stages of the procurements, okay, the development monitored by the government. Generally, I think in the last class that we discussed on, generally for the construction will be the PM company or PM entity will be public work department. Okay. Relationship with private contractor is short term. Okay, once the projects what do you call it completed, there is a handover, commissioning and handover. So that's basically the end of the relationship with the private sector. Applicable for project with high socio-economic returns and those justified on strategic considerations. Okay, sometimes okay, it's not easy to give if it is a key areas of the government services. Normally they don't outsource directly and then pass it to the private sector. Okay, like healthcare, for instance, still the services is still in the hands of government. Okay, because okay, it's just the nature of the services. You know, the private sector it's not be able to provide them. It's so expensive. Right? Okay, with regards to the PPP, funding via private financial resources without public sector explicit guarantee. Okay, so you can see that very interesting. Okay, private financial resources. Okay, private funding with without public sector explicit guarantee or no financial guarantee by the government. Because sometimes there are projects or government projects and then pass it to the private sector, but there is always a clause in the contract of the government guarantee. Okay, in what anything happen, if there is loopholes in the financing, so the government will pay. Okay, but in the case of PP, it should be without that. Impact on public budget spread over the duration of the concession. Okay, so basically the private sector can collect the money over a long time period. Okay, so I think the good example of this PPP is a highway, highway with tolls. Okay, so that is based on concession over the concession period, 20 or 30 years. I think generally 30 years that they basically manage the asset. Okay, if you look at concession asset, the highway toll plus highway, for instance. So plus is basically they're receiving a concession from the government. They can manage the asset, collect the money but the way they collect the money is a bit different. Not only directly from government have to pay in the form of rental, but they also charge the users. It's quite fair, I think. Okay, I mean we can debate because toll rates is one of the areas where it can become a political issue. Okay, but nevertheless, that's the use of concession. And risks are allocated to parties which can manage them more efficiently. So the private sector, public sector involvement is through enforcement of pre-agreed KPIs in the contracts. Definitely here is concession contracts. Another example, okay, beside the toll is, I think the use of concession is waste management. Waste management like Indah Water, okay, and then rubbish collector. These are all use concession. Okay, there are a main company that basically receive the concession but the government agency, department or study body is basically monitoring the performance of the waste management company. Okay, but waste management company definitely in terms of rubbish collection, they outsource further. Okay, based on their contracts. Possibly that is short-term contracts. Okay, with the sub-suppliers. Okay, but the company itself, they hold that concession over the 20 years or 30 years for them to be able to recoup with what all the costs that they incurred, because they have to invest. If you look at waste management, they have to have a facility basically to manage the waste. Basically, these are in the urban areas, because waste management is huge problems. I mean, waste basically rubbish, to control rubbish. I think this is a problem across the globe. Even Malaysia now, we are receiving the rubbish from developed countries, isn't it? Used to be, there was an issue, we received rubbish from plastic rubbish from UK, and then somehow there is a mismanagement in between. Okay, but okay, in Malaysia also it's happening, right? I mean, so these are the government services, but then been outsourced to the concession company in the case of Malaysia. And this, I think, in the waste management is an example of how the federal government agency work closely with the local government, okay, and with the state government as well, to resolve this waste management problem. Okay. And then public sector involvement is looking for, okay, long duration relationship with private contractors, okay, because that's also nature. I think very similar. It's opposite for conventional procurements, where it's short-term relationship, whereas in the case of public-private partnership is a long-term contracts, okay, basically been translated into concession contracts. Applicable for project with commercial viability. Okay, what it means is basically a commercially viable. In other words, private sector can take the job. What does that mean, class? If I say like that, commercially viable. Anyone? That the private sector can take the job. So what does it mean in a very simple term? Anyone? Any question in this class? Let me see. Any questions so far? No chat. Sorry?
Profitable.
Exactly, profitable. Okay, they can achieve their ROI, okay, rate of returns in their investment. I think it's quite fair, because private sector, they have to invest. Of course, for them to get a job, also they have to bid. They have to bid for the job. But concession company, it depends. If the company is wholly owned by the government, it's not an issue of bidding. Okay, but still, because of they are companies, they are more flexible. They can choose their suppliers, okay, in terms of control by the government, and also Parliament, not directly as the statutory bodies or departments. Okay, there are more flexibilities. Okay, that's why, unless if there is big problem, then it will reach the Parliament. Okay, but not to it's not like a month-to-month monitoring. Okay, of course, ministry will monitor them. Okay, their performance, because it is related to the main services to the public. Okay, in case of waste management. Okay, profitable. Okay, so you need to understand that kind of if it is a statement, so what exactly been translated into items in accounting or in financial management, so that or control. Okay, so you can justify in that manner. Right, privatization funding. We have private financial resources, very similar to PPP, without implicit of guarantee, right? No impact on the level of public sector expenditure directly, because privatization, it means that the government entities wholly owned, but they can get their own funding, okay, like Petronas, okay, they can issue bonds, for instance, or maybe TNB, right? But of course with the treasury approval, and board and treasury approval, and some of the subsidiaries are listed also, so they can get that direct funding from the market. Okay, not directly being funded every year that GLC receive budget from as part of the budget. Okay, so you don't see that. So you don't see that, unlike you are in like government statutory bodies or departments. Okay, they receive budget annually from the government coffer. Okay, but for the JLC, they don't receive those, okay, annually. But if they do, then they have to be directly accountable to the Public Account Committee. Government act as a regulator, okay, and then so right, regulator definitely there are specific act to make sure that they can enforce. Long duration relationship with private contractors applicable for project with high commercial viability. Okay, so very similar to private partnership. Okay, what I can say in the case of Malaysia, I think they don't go for full-scale privatization. Maybe for other countries, they go for full-scale privatization. What it means is basically the government outsource entirely the services to the private sector, and then the ownership also be transferred to the private sector. Okay, but in the case of Malaysia, the major business like telecom and TNB, the ownership are still held by the government. Okay, even the key areas, if you look at Sam Darby, okay, plantations, say, but it's wholly owned by the government. Okay, so for some strategic reasons. Okay, but nevertheless, you must know that privatization is an option for the government. For them, is to be able to reduce their size. Okay, so not much will reduce the pressure on their coffer. But at the same time, still they can someone can I think the ownership can be shared with the private sector as well as is transferred to the private sector. So that's the privatization. So I think at this point, privatization no longer becoming a main mechanism, but it's more on, of course, government from time to time they establish company, but generally these company are wholly owned by the government. So I would expect that recently they established this 5G company. Okay, then this 5G company will be wholly owned by the government. Okay, but so they have that flexibility. At the same time, government still hold the control. Okay, this is an example of PPP. Okay, you can see that petroleum drilling in Malaysia. So it's not something new. I think petroleum drilling, because petroleum is federal resources. I think this one example of there are two. I think commodity were owned by the government, petroleum and also gold. If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me, but definitely petroleum. Okay, petroleum in any place that we find petroleum. Yes, the other petroleum who own the commodity, by basically owned by the federal government. I would say own, but the resources if you find, then the quickly the jurisdiction to control the asset is basically in the hands of the federal government. Definitely petroleum, but I was told gold as well. Maybe others. Anyone want to share something? Okay, let us look at this because petroleum exploration is very expensive. I think in Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken, what year that we found the petroleum in Malaysian shore? Generally, it was in Brunei, and then it was I think there was oil in Sarawak, and then there was also exploration, and then they found oil in east coast of east coast of Peninsular Malaysia. I think from that point on, then a lot of extraction. So nevertheless, I think because of to rely on government alone to explore, I mean to extract the petroleum, we don't definitely that time. Limitation in terms of capacity, technology, okay, resources. So that's why there is partnership with the global players, okay, like Shell, like BP, ASO, Exxon, and others. So you can see this in terms of cost, the sharing, production sharing contract, they call it PAC. So revenue and cost in use from 1995 to present, so currently. So what are the revenue being used for? To cover for cash payment in terms of royalties, 5% for federal government, 5% for states, taken off from the gross revenue. Okay, so now you know 10% is basically of the petroleum revenue will be directly paid to the federal and state government. State, of course, belong to depending on the state that been extracted, the petroleum being extracted at Terengganu and Sarawak. So Sarawak recently was asking for more sharing. And then to cover the cost, something quite logical, okay, the petroleum cost recovery, okay, basically, you know, the development and extraction, the operating costs, development costs. So that will take up 70% of the gross revenue. Okay, ceiling for contractors has increased over the years due to rising complexity and higher unit cost to monetize the hydrocarbon. Okay, I think this chunk has become 70% simply because of I think the easy way to understand this, I was told by one of my friends working in this petroleum industry, because okay, unlike in the US where they have or in the Middle East, in the US they have shale oil, isn't it? Where they basically the oil is on the surface. And then in the Middle East, it's not that deep. But in the case of Malaysia, for them to drill the petroleum is very far inside the earth. It's like 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers, maybe more. You know, drilling the all these limes and stones before they can extract the oil. So because now it's become deeper and deeper. So those petroleum which is on the nearer part is all extracted. Now what is left is still very far. So more cost is needed to extract them. Of course, I mean, on top of that, what's the good part in Malaysia, we also have gas, not only the petroleum as well as gas. So, but nevertheless, you can see that 70% is from the gross revenue to cover the costs. And then at the end, there's a profit sharing, okay? So profit sharing split between Petronas, contractors, and petroleum income tax payment to the government, decreasing due to higher unit costs in these key areas. So you can see that clearly. Yeah? So 20% expected as profit. So 3.7% for Petronas, 8.7% for contractors. So these contractors are all the companies that explore, involved in exploration and extraction of the petroleum. Okay, I think you can give. I mean the big name like Shell, like Exxon and BP. Okay, and also on top of that, government also receive petroleum income tax. Okay. But I think the idea here to show is basically how the government benefit, the country benefit with this partnership. So petroleum drilling is one area, one example. But you just show another way to look at it as well. But you need to make the project viable or the business viable. Otherwise, the business cannot sustain. And then, I mean, it's not for the best interest of all contracting parties or parties here, both public and private sectors. So that's why government need to be fair in how they operate this. Okay, of course they want to get benefit from the competition, good services, but in the case of petroleum, it's quite different because it's very few companies that have that expertise to explore. Okay, and also their vast experience over the years, and also the exploration is in different countries. Okay, so that technology is not cheap. Okay, and on top of that, there is a profit sharing. I think there's another. I think this one is just to show the trend. Okay, the trend over the years. You can see that the cost is in the bottom there. Okay, from 20% now it become 44%. Then government revenue. Okay, and Petronas, and also the partners. Okay, another way. I think how this the cost become significantly increased as I mentioned. Okay, but the idea here is just to share with you. I think this is a good example, the partnership between public and private sectors. Okay, because these has been happening for many years. Okay, at least in the case of Malaysia over there, it is the drilling started in 1970s, so more than 50 years. But the exploration, I think, much earlier. Okay, so you can see this increasing in public services. Right. This is another example of partnership between public and private sector. This is in the case of in the US, where the rockets, okay, by NASA with partners, they call it SpaceX. Oh no, I think this one is NASA SpaceX. So the partnership between NASA is government agency, and with the SpaceX to develop these rockets. Okay. Let me, before I turn this, maybe I made a bit change.
As we're continuing to load liquid oxygen onto both the first and second stages, the RP1 kerosene fuel is now completely loaded on both stage 1 and stage 2. All continues to go well, just under 6 minutes to launch.
In about 30 seconds, we'll enter terminal count. Dragon's onboard computers will take control of the vehicle. Both fuel on first and second stage is complete, and liquid oxygen loading continues with the second stage at about 80%, first stage at 95%. Something else you might notice is water rushing the pad shortly before liftoff. That's to suppress the sound and keep any sound from imparting a load on Crew Dragon as it prepares to lift off.
Dragon is in configure for terminal count. Dragon is on internal power. Falcon 9 propellant tanks are pressurizing for strongback retract.
Good confirmation that Dragon is on internal power, and now we'll be looking for a major milestone before we launch today. That'll be the strongback retract. John, you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Leah, if we get a close-up of the Dragon at second stage.
Strongback is retracting.
We've heard the call out, strongback retracting. That's a two-step sequence. First, there are clamp arms around the very top of the second stage. You can see one of them just above the gaseous oxygen vapors coming out of the second stage. Those arms will open up, and then just inside of T-minus 4 minutes, once the arms are released, we'll begin to retract the strongback alongside the vehicle. It'll move back 2 degrees in position, and by about T-minus 3.5 minutes, we ought to be finished with that. The strongback will retract to 45 degrees away from the rocket once we hit T0 as part of the liftoff sequence.
And at T-minus 3 minutes,
Right now, we're waiting for the retract. And there you can see the strongback is beginning to move away from the vehicle. And it looks like we are just about into the required pre-launch position, just a couple degrees away from the Falcon 9 and the Dragon capsule. But right now, T-minus 3 minutes, 8 seconds, everything continues to be go on Dragon and Falcon 9.
Currently standing.
Dragon is in terminal count.
And Dragon is in terminal count, and we are standing by to hear that stage 1 liquid oxygen loading is complete. Stage
1 LOX load is complete.
And there we have it, and stage 2 should finish shortly after at about 2 minutes prior to liftoff.
So now the last major event is finished liquid oxygen loading on stage 2. It wraps up at about T-minus 2 minutes. Then at about T-minus a minute and a half, we have to drain back and vent down the liquid line that goes up the strongback alongside the Falcon 9. If you see a large white cloud about midway down around the rocket, that's normal. That's again just the gaseous oxygen hitting the warm, moist Florida air.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete. Dragon is in auto idle.
And good calls that stage 2 liquid oxygen load is complete. That means we have full fuel on the first and second stages, that densified kerosene, and we're full of the oxidizer. Liquid oxygen on the first and second stage as well. Now just a minute and 20 seconds until liftoff today. And as you can hear those sounds, like Soichi Noguchi said, the vehicle is alive. Coming up in 10 seconds, we'll look to hear that Dragon is in countdown and Falcon 9 is in startup.
Dragon is in countdown. FTS is armed. Falcon 9 is in startup and is now controlling.
50 seconds now until liftoff. That FTS you heard is flight termination.
Dragon, SpaceX, go for launch.
SpaceX, this is Resilient. Roger, go.
Go for launch, and at 37 seconds, the International Space Station flying over Kennedy Space Center.
All for one, crew one for all.
Crew Dragon poised to go catch it. 20 seconds till liftoff.
T-minus 15 seconds. Falcon 9 is configured for flight. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
And resilience rises. Not even gravity contains humanity when we explore as one for all.
M1E propulsion is nominal.
That's the word we want to hear. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
As 30 seconds into this historic mission, flying crew on board Dragon and Falcon 9. Stage 1 is preparing to throttle down. This is in preparation for max Q, which is maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Stage 1, throttle down.
There's that call out for throttle down.
Power and telemetry continue to be nominal for the vehicle, now traveling at 262 meters per second.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
There's that call out. The Falcon 9 is supersonic, and we will be passing through max Q here shortly, the largest structural load during ascent.
Max Q.
And there's that call out. That Falcon has passed through
Stage
max
1,
Q.
throttle up.
1 Bravo.
And we've just entered Stage 1 Bravo abort mode. That's going to take them through the end of the first stage burning just before second stage activates off the coast of North Carolina. T plus 1 minute and 40 seconds into flight. Dragon and Falcon 9 traveling 709 meters per second. "13 minutes into today's mission, the view on the right-hand side of your screen coming from, so reconfiguring the cameras inside Crew Dragon to give them a little bit of privacy up there on orbit, as well as the thermal control system. They're working at clearing those issues, but everything so far looking good for Dragon.
Dragon's move. We are just waiting on that phase burn to complete. It is about a 9-minute burn, and it should be closing here shortly in about a minute or so, but we'll wait for that call out and that confirmation.
And everything we've heard so far is that the burn is proceeding nominally. All of the Dracos are performing well. The first
on our life, right? I think they said there's so many products and services that it basically resulted from space exploration. Okay, so you can see the extent of how the public and private can form a partnership to benefit the country. Yeah. Any questions so far? Okay, Abdul Aziz. PPP is one of the major pillars of Saudi and Gulf countries. Okay, despite hard time for economy, let's go on spending, but major transportation and healthcare projects are in progress. Okay, good notes. Thank you for the feedback, Abdul Aziz. Okay, so you can see the scale is very different. Okay, the public and with this partnership. Because it's not only I think they can pursue something that sometimes the market or the demand side is not big enough, but still it's very important to the country, so they can provide that. So I think with this partnership, the government have that, okay, can use the expertise and they can pay over the years, instead of relying only from the capabilities of the citizens to pay. Sometimes it's limited, okay, and pay on for the sake of because they generally become the catalyst for further development. I think that's the idea of when we look at this. So with this space exploration, I think of course is creating that boundary, try to extend that boundary, but the benefit is basically to improve whatever that we have here down here. Okay. Right. Now we move on to PFI. Right. Another. I think these are now been promoted. Okay. I think it started in the UK and now in Malaysia also we use this private finance initiative. There's another way to finance the projects. Okay. Provide financing. Okay, so I think we go through the features of the PFI. Right, the private sector, okay, design, builds, finance, and operate the facilities. They call it DBFO. Okay, so I think if you look at so far our discussion, we discussed that the public sector generally for procurements they develop specifications, right? They finance the projects, so and then give the bidding to the and then award the projects to the private sector. The private sector basically construct the facilities and then hand over. Okay, hand over. That's it. So like hospital building, the whole building is basically run by the government. Okay, but in the case of PFI, it's not like that. There is a different. Okay, so all process just now that being conducted or undertaken by the government now is basically undertaken by the private sector right from the beginning to design, build, finance, and operate the facilities. Okay, so by the private sector, but to provide public services. So if you remember, I show you the government hospital just now, IUM hospital. So IUM hospital is being developed under PFI. So it means that the private sector, they design, they build, and then on top of that, they finance the projects. Okay, so of course, they once they finance, they involve, is that capital expenditure they develop, they need definitely be reimbursed. So in that sense, not only they construct the facilities, they also operate the facilities. So from there, they can charge the government for them to collect or to recoup their investments. Okay, so with that, it's very natural to look at that kind of arrangement. So it's you can expect that this PFI will require long-term contracts. Okay, normally 25 to 30 years. Okay, that within these schemes. So if you look at the long-term contract, it's very similar to the traditional PPP that we mentioned just now, based on concession contracts. So it's very similar. Okay, with the concession contracts. Right, on top of that, public sector make regular payment known as unitary charge. Okay, so under private finance, the government have to pay. Okay, if they cannot get it from the users, the government have to pay. But they don't pay like lump sum. Okay, lump sum here means, okay, once the project completed, the government pay the whole money. That one is under traditional procurements. Whereas here is unitary charge. It means they pay over the years, over the concession period. So let's say the concession period is 30 years, then they pay over the 30 years. Okay, it's like rental in a sense. You pay rental. Did you ever pay rent for rooms and others? Class?
No, sir.
Did you ever pay rental?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it's a kind of rental, okay? Rental of the facilities. When the contract expires, ownership of the asset either remains with the private sector providers or is returned to the public sector. So there is option. I think in the original form when it was introduced in the UK, so that is the option is given. Okay, in a way it's like leasing, okay, or capital lease. So at the end of the contracts, then the asset either will remain in the private sector hands or be transferred to the public sector. So that's the option given. Very similar to leasing. Right, now we move on. Types of PFI. Okay, first type, services sold to the public sector. Okay, like hospitals, schools. So these are the type where definitely the government pay the rental, or the government pay the charge, the unitary charge. And then financially freestanding projects, entirely financed and managed by the private sector. Revenue is charging from the users. Okay, these are very similar to toll. Toll. Okay, but toll here, in the case of concession, okay, but the construction of the highway is basically if it is under the traditional PPP, with the construction, they want I think the construction of the highway is also funded by the government, whereas here is funded by the private sector. Okay, and that's why they charge the end user. So the charging to end user to cover both. One is to cover the development expenditures as well as the operation of the, I think, three components there. To cover their development costs, their operation costs, as well as their profits. Okay, so that is but it's just that it can be spread over for a very long time of periods. That's why the charges are quite reasonable. The toll rate, if you look at this, is a case of Severn Bridge. Okay, Severn Bridge is basically between Bristol and Cardiff. So I was in Cardiff last time when I did my PhD. So Severn Bridge, you're always crossing there if you go to the Midlands, okay, to London and others. So crossing, of course, you pay the toll just like in Malaysia. So what I'm saying is, but the rate is very reasonable, okay, taking into account the UK context, okay. So they can still spread over the costs and also to get their returns. Joint ventures, public and private sectors work as a partnership, okay. So private sector retains the control. So there's also can be an option for the government to work where it's a kind of joint venture. Okay, work together. Important features of PFI: service focus. Okay, to provide the services to target groups. Okay, very similar to, because it's basically provided by the private company. Okay, they can have that service focus. Risk transfer. Okay, optimum transfer of risk to the private sector. So all the risk in the managing the projects as well as operating the facilities is transferred to the private sector. But there's a condition there. So you can see that in the bracket, when cost of PFI is lower than PSC. Okay, what is PSC? Public sector comparator. So in other words, if the government provide the services, if the government run the services, okay, so it will be costly. So that's why a PFI scheme become viable. Okay, so that's why a PFI scheme can only proceed if the PFI cost is lower than the public sector comparator. In terms of basis of payments, it based on performance base. Okay, progress pay of construction and pay for services based on performance. Okay, but our performance here, of course, been stated in the KPIs. So what is expected? Okay, type of services to the public. Okay, and then the condition of the facilities and others. So can be translated into KPIs in the contracts. Ownership owned by the private sector, innovative design. I think that's kind of expected. Right, project-related risks, including interest rate, okay, because they also have to come up with the financing. Completion of projects, okay, always have a risk. Okay, can be controllable or unavoidable. If you see nowadays, I think simple, one quick example is the impact of COVID. If you look at the impact of COVID, all projects are, construction projects are delayed, okay? 5 months, 6 months, can be 1 year delay. So, and no government also not providing tender for the projects, okay? So you can see that it's huge losses by the company. These are risks, okay? So in the case of PFI, this risk can be transferred to the private sector, okay? Construction and operation cost overrun, okay? This also should be transferred to the private sector. Construction costs, I think if you look at materials, for instance, one big, in the construction, definitely one big materials are steel, okay? Steel a big part of, if you look at building, the big chunk of the cost is basically cost of steel. This cost of steel is sometimes the fluctuations is beyond control, because it's commodity, very important commodities, and if there is any shortage of the commodities, the swing of the price is very huge. There was a time where for steel, it only can be purchased through cash, okay, cash delivery only, okay, COD. You are talking about maybe one purchase involving 500,000 or millions of dollars, only can be done through cash. Okay, that happened, okay, during the time of crisis, okay, and particularly during the huge swing of the prices. Then the suppliers, they cannot cope with the credits, okay? So the only condition they have, if you want to buy, you must buy by cash. So these are risks, okay? One example of risks that need to be borne by the construction companies as well as by the government, okay? So but in the case of PFI, this should be fully transferred to the private sector company. All right, these are is an example where government now is an ongoing project that they develop this public sector comparator to develop the database. So these are the criteria that they're looking at. Standard unit cost of the projects, okay, they're looking at the standard unit cost, okay, and a comparison between public and private sector, okay, including operational costs, development costs, and life cycle costs. Okay, I think you can check the okay, last time you can get access, but now I'm not sure, is it they block whatever, but you can check later on. But these are the criteria they're looking at for them to develop the public sector comparator. Definitely, as you're looking at the cost for the projects. But here, not only the development costs, okay, but construction costs also covers operational costs, okay, because you talk about concession, and then they have to operate the buildings. Okay, what happened in the case of, let's say, hospitals? Hospitals is under PFI scheme. It means that the hospital building is managed by the private sector. Okay, not only the necessities in the hospital itself. Okay, let's say the bed, the medical supplies. Of course, these are all outsourced. But on top of that, the building management itself is under the private sector. In the case of PFI, okay, you see they have the development unit. Okay, in the case of UIA, for instance, development division. Okay, to look after the properties. But here, all this the micromanagement of the building is basically in the hands of the private sector, where they will be compensated through the rental. Okay, PFI in Malaysia introduced under 9th Malaysian Plan to enhance high contribution to growth from private sector and government-linked companies. Okay, PFI will involve the transfer to the private sector the responsibility to finance and manage capital investment, including construction, management, and maintenance of public sector's assets. Okay, in return, the public sector will pay the private sector the form of lease rental payment. Okay, and then upon the expiry of the contracts, the facilities will be transferred to the government at no cost. And these are the features of PFI in Malaysia. Okay, So I think they make it very clear it's a lease rental. In the UK, they call it unitary charge. And then at the end of the concession period, okay, they don't give any option for the private sector. The asset must be transferred to the government. Okay, but I think you can think about it. Some of the possible challenges if they do that, because building management, okay, need expertise. You have to hire experts, okay, and you have to budget for it, right? So that's why when government provide the construction is under development budget. When we come to operate the facilities, okay, it can be administrative buildings. That one, they will be under the maintenance of the building, will be under operating budget. So generally, if they have a new buildings, so they must also plan for the maintenance of the buildings, okay, under the operating budget. So they must have both in that sense. Okay, during the construction is a development budget, whereas one is completed and handed over, then the building can be used, okay, for the agency. And so with that, they must also have budgets to operate the buildings. Okay, with the people, the right personnel, technicians, and then supports budgets to make sure that they can maintain the building. Okay, the building, we talk about cleanliness. Okay, we talk about water. We talk about lighting. We talk about as I said, I think water and lighting are very important. Then the equipments, the furnitures. Okay, those need to be budgeted for. Right, there is a PFI central units under EPU as well as National Implementation NID. Okay, basically the ICU. Benefit to the government, PFI reduce the upfront payment for development projects. Okay, anyone can explain this? PFI reduces the upfront payment for development projects. What do you understand? Any answer? No one. Are you there, class? Are you still with me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, gone already?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, very low, huh? Only 88 students attended the class. Wow. So I lost 10, 20, 12 students. What happened, huh? All right, it should be 100. All busy, already busy. Wow. Make sure, I think, check your friend. I think the team leaders, okay, what you can do. I think I have, because this class is very big, okay. I think what I can do is after your thing, we have to make this kind of changes. In your group, make sure that they're also coming to the class. If they miss, you need to highlight to me, right? Or even friends. If you see that your friend somehow failed to turn up to classes, so let me know. Maybe they face huge problems, internet connection, okay? Maybe getting ill, whatever. They cannot follow the class. So please inform me. Then we can discuss and others try to resolve their problems. Or if you can help them as well. Okay. Right, because otherwise it should be everybody should come to class at least, but not almost 88, 12, 15, 17 students. So I think quite big. See, we split class into half, so it's like what, 7, 8 students miss the class. Okay, I hope that you can help. Okay, quickly, benefits reduces upfront payment. I think you can quickly understand this if we use the traditional procurements. Let's say to develop. Okay, I think if you look at the 5G, because the 5G is the traditional procurements, because I think government quickly mentioned that they will use 5 billion, 2 billion or 5 billion worth of budgets. Okay, so huge amount of money that is need to be somehow developed, or to they have to find the money where they can get. Whereas in the case of PFI, this will be spread out over the concession periods. Okay, depending on the level of the rental payments from either monthly or annually. I think monthly, because the company need to operate, isn't it? PFI enhance quality and efficiency in public facilities and services because it's run by the private sector. PFI help to stimulate the growth of the construction industry. When it was first introduced in 2006 or 2008, it's basically to help the construction industry. Yeah? I think during the time of Pala, there was no major projects, but through PFI, still the government can could undertake major projects, but financed by the private sector. Okay, another example of PFI and recent PFI projects. UiTM 6 new campus, IUM teaching hospital. Okay, I think the photo there. Transport terminal in Gombak. I think everybody see that, isn't it? But I think there was a delay in the completion, because otherwise it should be completed already. But I think still not completed yet. I believe that the COVID have that impact on their progress. Eco City, Media City, IPP in Kimanis, Perdana University, Ampang Trust Highway, and also Rubber Research Institute. These are based on the news by in 2012 by PwC. But you see that sometimes the projects, even it was announced in 2012, but still not completed yet. In the case of transport terminal in Gombak. Right, I think for UiTM is completed. IUM teaching hospital is already in use. So you can see that. And so you can expect that from time to time this PFI will be undertaken by governments. Issues of PPP faced by public sector accountants. Quickly, I think I have another possibly 5 minutes. Monitoring long-dated and contingent obligations, guarantees, minimum revenue guarantee support for government-linked financial institutions. Okay, so you can see that with these procurements, sometimes there is a guarantee by the government, so that can give rise to contingent obligations by the government. I think financial guarantee by the government is quite common. From year to year, you can see in the annual reports that they show that the obligations. Judging and ensuring value for money. Okay, as I mentioned, that value for money for procurement projects need to be undertaken over the project cycle, as well as not only that, in the case of PFI, is over the years. So because in other words, because the payment is quite fixed, but the performance must demonstrate value for money. Okay, so that is the work of the monitoring body. In the case of, let's say, as I mentioned just now, waste products, waste management. So there is a monitoring body by the government, government agency monitoring the private sector to make sure that they provide value for money services. Calculating termination payments for debt and equity in the event of government default, concessionist default, or force majeure. Okay, I think force majeure here is happening either through wars. Okay, and I think things happen in the case of now is the certain industries are collapsing. Okay, because of COVID. Let's say in tourism. Okay, companies are basically cannot continue their business because of the this kind of pandemic. Okay, beyond their control. So I think that's can be an example of force majeure, right? Then the government recently. Okay, I think in the case of change of government, you can see the big projects. I think one example was when the previous government, the Malaysian government, involved in the contracts of rapid rail, isn't it? Rapid train. Okay, rapid train between Singapore to China. But then I think they abandoned the project. So it cost the government money. So of course they have there is a kind of project contract termination. So I think there was in news how much it cost to the government. They pay around 2 million per day because of the contract terminations. Setting a reserve price for privatizations. Okay, I think possibly these are reflecting the valuation. When the case of to privatize a private company, a government companies to private, valuing real estates and external costs and benefits when purchasing and clearing lands, created enhanced infrastructure assets. Okay, but if you ask the government accountants, they can simply say that all this can be done through engagement with their private counterparties, or they can ask quotations or proposal from the private sector. Okay, or valuer, they can just rely on third-party valuation. Okay, how to handle unsolicited bid and negotiated contracts. Okay, this also I think is a challenge in the public sector. Right, scope of PPP, extending the scope beyond development projects, PPP in healthcare services, security, family-based services, partnership with NGOs. I think as we speak, it's happening, where government is working together with NGOs. I think COVID also provide that platform, where government works. I think in the case of COVID, helping the B40s, those are basically adversely affected by all this needy group of people. So you can see government works with NGOs, because the NGO, they have the advantage of knowing their target groups because they have been serving them for many years. So the government work with them. Not only I think NGO as an organizations, with individuals as well. Okay, I think we can have individuals are very active approaching. I think even at community base, as well as at the state level, as well as national level. Okay, we have celebrities going around helping the people. Okay, and then basically being assisted by the governments or by the state government, local government, and others. So you can see that when with that partnership, a lot of things can be done by the government, as well as as they work as a team to solve the problems. I think COVID provide that experience. Okay, and we've done it. I think fantastic. I mean, it's par excellent. Okay, I think you can provide your comment as well on that. But generally, I think in terms of addressing the needs of needy groups of people, I think pretty much being done. It's still ongoing. Okay, on top of government schemes and initiative by the Ministry of Finance. All right, so that's the end. Any question? Interesting topics, but interestingly, no questions. Oh, is it too tough or too easy? All general knowledge only. Class, are you still with me? Oh, now become 90. Okay, good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, good to know. All right, if you have any questions, you can ask. Okay, if no question, then I will end this presentation. Okay, and if you have any questions, personal questions, you can also ask at the end of this lecture. Right, so Wednesday is the midterm. Okay, next week you use the whole week for your assignments, but you can always engage with me, or if you need discussions or advice. Things, many groups now start coming to have consultations. I think if you know other group as well, we can have one common time also to discuss. All right, so no questions. I will end this with wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.